What I want to talk more about is some of the more fundamental perceptual things which are important, kind of gating mechanisms before we even get to those interactive parts. So hands up rather than saying if you can see what this is. You've seen it all before, haven't you? Okay, just a quick question. And I want you to answer this quite quickly, just with your first impressions. Is this a good logo? Hands up if it's a good logo. How many people thought it was a good logo? Okay, we'll return back to that logo later. So, did anyone not see what's in this picture here? What I've cunningly done from the logo, you see, is kind of flushed out your memory, so hopefully you don't remember any details of the logo. But how about if I do that, and then do that? Does that help? So can you see the dog, for those who couldn't see it before? So there isn't a dog there. What did you see? Did you see something else?
It was a snake.
Oh, there we go.
Going into a pool.
Whoa. That's brilliant. That's like Rorschach ink block test. That's a lot. There is actually the outline of a dog here, or at least we think there's a dog. There isn't actually a dog there, there's just loads of dots there. But many of us, some of us get different things, but many of us will see a dog here. You'll definitely see a dog here, but there still isn't a dog there, there's just dots. And there's no lines here, there's no form here that shows you where the dots are. But there's rules and there's reasons why we start to interpret this as some physical form. And actually many, many years ago, in fact, I think it was in the late 19th century, there's a group of German psychologists called the Gestalt psychologists who looked at rules of how visual form and things go together. And these were the Gestalt kind of grouping principles. So have many of you seen these before? It's amazing how many designs now you see, web designs, physical designs, print designs, that really forget the fundamentals of these. And they're so important today just to apply. So it's what sets everything together. It's what makes visual relationships work. It's what makes pages look non-cluttered, even though they've got the same amount of information in. Applying these well is an incredibly good technique for visual communication and making sure that people see what you want them to see in the order that you want them to see it.
John, good designers do that intuitively, right? Good designers, I think, do it intuitively. But that could be quite a nice checklist.
But it's a good checklist to have, I think. Because if you go, I'm not sure that's working, because those elements don't seem to have ownership by the heading that it's going to be, and they get confused with those ones. Right, how can I change that? Well, I can change the proximity, so I make those go closer to their owner. Or I can have good enclosure, I will put a board around it. Or I can have common fates, I'll make sure they're all the same shape. So you can apply a checklist. I mean, good designers will do it, but they should also know the rules. And part of what I'm saying is, know the rules, apply the rules. Break the rules as long as you break the rules on purpose. It's fine. It's like usability. You can break the rules as long as you do it with intent and you're actually trying to create an effect. But if you just do it through ignorance, then it's probably not the right thing to do. Yeah, so good designers will achieve this, I think intuitively, but it's a good checklist to have as well. And the interesting thing about the visual system is, actually, we've studied it to death. I spent 6 years just looking at that, remember? But we know quite a lot about it. This is called the modulation transfer function. It's what describes how different sizes of elements go through your eyes and actually create an effect in your brain. So you're more sensitive to these kind of sizes than you are to these sizes or these sizes, and there's a peak. So that tells us if you're wanting to actually create something that's going to stand out the most, you design it with this size or this amount of visual angle, this spatial frequency. There's also a temporal frequency one. So we know for different temporal frequencies, flashes, there's certain peak sensitivities. So you can start to play with the luminance contrast and do all sorts of things, knowing kind of rules like this. This is one for colour, and this is the map for where different visual properties get segmented and analysed with different parts of your brain. So I studied for a long time this area here, MT, which is what's responsible for, surprise, surprise, motion and also depth. So I studied that. So what your brain does is segment lots of visual things to different places. Then eventually, this is the bit we don't know, it combines them all together to create a whole impression. But knowledge of where these different things happen, knowledge of the rules, means you can start manipulating the visual form of things in order to create the effects that you want. And of course, all this was just preamble, so I can show you some nice visual illusions, which are always fun. So there's that one I've shown you already. There's this one, very, very famous triangle. So there is no triangle there. Interestingly, though, if you were to stick an electrode in your head and record from one cell in your brain that happens to be responsible for looking and analysing orientations like that, your brain cells sees that illusory border. So your brain's actually geared up to see those things. Kind of interesting. What about this one? So the job here is how many black dots are there? So again, this is a very famous visual illusion. This is all to do with lateral inhibition, so the reasons why this happens is known. So consequently, if you're having, well, Windows 8, which is the phone I've got. Interestingly, that's why you have it on black, so it doesn't create those effects. Sometimes you can create those effects unwittingly, which is rather annoying. What about this one? So count the elephant's legs. That's all about context. Count the dog's legs. That's all about context as well. You can start to play with colour. You can start to play with colour and form and orientation. So these are these whizzing around and making you feel a bit sick? That's because the places where you analyse those get separate according to the colour, and then they get put back slightly delayed, so they have a motion component to them, and that's what makes that happen. Anyone getting that one? So for many people on this one, these all start to rotate because of the colour opponency. What about this one? So what is moving around? What does anyone see? Stare at the cross. A green dot. Anyone get a green dot? There's no green dot there at all. So if you actually try and follow the space going around, you'll see there's no dot there at all. If you stare at the centre, you'll see. Again, these are all to do with rules about how the brain processes colour. So if you know those kind of things, you can start to play with them in really interesting ways to create interesting effects. We've got a special place in our brain that's responsible just for faces. So if I turn these upside down, so this place is just there on the side. It's a special place just in your brain that's responsible for faces. That's why faces are so compelling, and why we have special centres in our brain that respond to facial expressions, facial identity. And also, it's got a direct link into our emotional centres as well. It's right next to our emotional centres, which is why faces have such an emotional component. Don't think you'd have won the election on that. Context, of course, is really important. So no one really understands how these higher orders of the brain actually start to put these things together and change our perception, but it's compelling. So B if you go that, 13 if you go that way, B if you go that. So context is really important. And I guess one of the themes is that we as human beings, and a bit like that thing that I showed you earlier, we as human beings try to create patterns and context and meaning from whatever we see. And if you understand the rules, you can start to force people to see the context and the patterns that you want rather than the ones that might invent themselves. Well, that one. Kind of interesting, isn't it? So I'll come back to this logo.
It's brilliant, depending on what it's selling.
For those of you who didn't see it, if I give you that and then show you the logo again, is anyone not getting it? Anyone? So this was made by a very famous, well he's famous now, Italian designer. And he made this logo up first and didn't have a brand for it. And then a branding company who now makes quite edgy clothing contacted him and asked him if he wanted to make a brand out of this. So they now sell kind of youth clothing. They sponsor motorsport. And what's interesting about it is the kids that get it, they're wearing these. And their parents don't realise that they're wearing a picture of two people shagging doggy style. And the kids love it because it's kind of a secret for them. It's emblazoned all over the TV. The advertisers haven't got it or anything, but there's hidden meaning within this kind of thing that's created. Some of you have just got it, obviously. That's kind of cool. So this was made absolutely on purpose to create an effect, a kind of subversive brand, and it kind of went viral, and it's now a very popular clothing brand. This was just a damn mistake. It's real. Can you imagine? They've changed it now. You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised now. What about that one? Yeah, if I hadn't shown you that first one, you probably wouldn't have noticed anything wrong with that. You might have noticed something wrong with that. This one is awesome. Anyone getting that one?
I see people fencing. Oh, you're so innocent.
You're so innocent, Rob. So there's 2 rules here. Well, in fact, there's 3 rules. The first is use things like grouping and context to create the effect that you want and do it with intent. The second is test your designs before you go and launch them, particularly if you spend a lot on branding. And the third is don't piss off your designer. Otherwise, you'll end up with something like that. Quite a lot of these effects and the effects in the visual system have been documented in easy, accessible ways. There's lots of kind of real scientific books on it, but these are really good references if you're interested in doing that for design of interfaces, but also information systems as well. Particularly good for kind of dashboards and information systems there. So the take home from all that perceptual stuff is design for the known rules of usability and interaction. So I showed you some of those, and that's just a given. We didn't have time to go into those. Design for the known rules of human perception. Can be vision, can be sound as well, can be potentially touch and smell. Now we're getting multimodal, and there are books and information on how to influence people's perceptions across all sorts of modalities. Make sure you test and improve, and make sure you don't piss off your designer.